what became, I think it's the third chapter of the book. I wrote that as a standalone, and then I think it was 7 pages, went back through, read that, and thought, okay, yep, he wants to be in the book. He's earned it, so we'll let him come play now.
Nice.
That's fascinating.
I mean, are you really going to tell him no? Because I feel like that's a super bad idea.
Didn't work out so well.
Good point. Yeah, once I introduced him, he was very scared.
You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.
All right. From the top?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Julia.
I'm Rachael.
And I'm Kelly.
And this is What You Should Read.
The podcast where we should all over our books.
And this is definitely not the second time we've done this intro.
No.
Nope.
No way.
No. Complete professionals.
Exactly. Yes. Smooth takeoff every single time.
Yes.
So we have a great episode planned. We're talking in a little bit to Michael Koryta, who has written many thrillers. His most recent one being Never Far Away, which we all read and we're really excited to talk about. And he's from Maine, which I'm very excited to talk to him about. But first, Rachael, what are you reading this week?
So currently I am halfway through Admission by Julie Buxbaum.
Mm-hmm.
I'm listening to the audiobook. I got it from my library. And I'm really enjoying it so far. It's really fast paced. I just started it yesterday. I probably will finish it today because I'm just enjoying it a lot. So I'll probably just keep listening to it and play Candy Crush or something on my phone so that I can get the book done because I'm really liking it. And then I think I'm going to pick up The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Darey. This is from Book of the Month. It was one of the top 5 finalists for Book of the Year last year. And it sounds really good. It's about this girl in Nigeria she's like 14 years old and her family is not doing well. And she has to go to Lagos and live with a family, like a rich family, and be like a domestic there. So I'm not sure much else about the plot. It sounds really like an interesting premise and I've heard good things. So yeah, I'm excited to get started with that.
Nice. Kelly, what are you reading?
I am reading The Unraveling of Cassidy, Holmes by Elissa R. Sloane. I'm really liking it. It is also a book of the month, and it is a debut. So this will be one of my 3 debuts for the challenge they have through the app.
I am still making my way through the audiobook of that. I kind of stopped and I'm starting it back up again, and it's getting pretty tense. I'm towards the end, so you'll have to let me know what you think of it. I am reading Outlawed by Anna North. Yay. And I'm enjoying it very much. We just cut to the part where she meets the outlaws that the book is about, and seems like a great cast of characters, so I'm excited. And I'm also reading a collection of short stories. Sarah Shun-Lien Bynum's book Likes, and it's really small. I got it from the library a while back, but I'm just sort of reading it one story at a time. It's okay so far. I didn't like the first story that much, but the second story was much better. And I think I need to go back and reread the first one because I don't think I understood exactly what was happening. And that's the risk, I think, with short stories, is if it's written in such a way where you're not quite sure what's going on. It's not like you have a whole novel to kind of get it and settle into it. So I think I will go back once I've read a few more.
Nice.
Yep, that's it.
Okay. So I'm continuing our book news trend of bad news only. Publishers Weekly has a very bad take on a kind of weird story. Okay, so there's this agent. His name is Brooke Sherman. And last week, there was an anonymous post on Query Tracker that people should not be trying to get him to be their agent because he is, and this is a direct quote, not agenting ethically. And I'm honestly not 100% sure of specifics, although the article went on to say that those allegations include lying to his authors about submissions and foreign rights. So I'm guessing that would mean that he is telling them that he has submitted manuscripts that he has not submitted, and that maybe there are foreign rights that have been sold that haven't been, whatever. Either way, definitely not a guy that you would maybe want representing you in your books. And so I think the story very clearly is bad agent loses clients, right? But instead, Publishers Weekly slipped in the lead, which is the first paragraph, a weird nod to him discovering Angie Thomas. And the exact wording they used is plucking her out of obscurity, which
weird take.
Weird. Yeah, it's weird anyway. And in a story that is about someone being bad at their job, you know, I think she's very important, so it makes sense to mention, like, oh, she was his client, but she fired him last week.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's appropriate to mention that, but don't give him any credit for her success.
Mm-hmm.
Because the
All the
reason
credit. It basically gives him all the credit with that line. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I mean, the reason we all know who Angie Thomas is and that she's so successful is because she's Angie Thomas.
Right.
And she writes amazing books.
Mm-hmm.
And they did apologize, Publishers Weekly apologized and amended the article, but it's ridiculous and very insulting.
I think this is a pattern with Publishers Weekly. I don't think this is the first time they've pulled something like this and then had to apologize. I think they know what's going to cause. I saw Bethany Morrow tweeting something about, she said, you know, exact same thing happened to me last year. Not exact same thing, but, you know, they used her to kind of cause some controversy. And she's like, they apologized then, but they clearly aren't really like taking it in and learning. They're doing this on purpose.
Yeah, right.
But also the headline of that article was very weird. It was like, bad day for agent. And it's like, he did this. This is his fault. He's not having a bad day. He's a bad agent. Like,
I mean, yeah, if anything, I feel like the headline should be like, white man faces consequences.
Yeah.
But,
and I'm not clear exactly on, like you said, it's not exactly clear what happened, but it doesn't matter. Multiple authors have come forward and say he's not, you know, behaving in a professional manner. We are not associating with him anymore. Angie Thomas elevated him.
Yeah.
And then now she fired him because he didn't do his job well. So I did love her tweet after, which was basically like, whew, well, that article was one heck of a query letter. It's like, Angie, you do not need to write a query letter. And it was funny.
It really was. I laughed very hard at that too, but I don't know every single client he had, but it sounds like Adam Silvera and Becky Albertalli, other YA authors of note, it looks like they fired him a few years ago, and they weren't really, you know, he wasn't credited with their success.
Yeah.
Which is super interesting because
what's the difference?
Right.
I don't know.
Like you said, it makes sense that they would mention Angie because she's his most famous client, I think. But yeah, to give him credit for any of her success is just, it shows a lack of awareness.
And really, that's kind of the best case scenario, is that they're doing this because they don't know better.
Yeah.
But
true.
Yeah.
I think they do know better. I think they do know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So our next segment is recent acquisitions. So Kelly, why don't you tell us about your recent acquisitions?
Okay, so last week, my friend Jen Petra Roy, her third middle grade novel, Life in the Balance, came out, and I pre-ordered it from An Unlikely Story, an indie bookstore near where she lives, and a signed copy should be on its way to me sometime soon. I'm very excited. The book is wonderful. You should all read it. And I don't have it, but I did read an e-copy earlier, and it's fantastic. Also, my only other acquisition, because I was very good for me, really for anybody last week, I bought one book, but my online book club, one of the people in it, my friend Christy, sent me a Christmas card that showed up at my house yesterday. Very excited. And there is a bookmark that says, "What happens in book club stays in book club."
I love it.
Yeah. It is super cute. And I'm excited to be celebrating a little bit of Christmas in February.
Nice.
Yes. I was also very good this week. I did not buy any books, but I did get a couple of books come in that I have on hold at the library that I'm very excited about, and especially The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Pilia. And this is another finalist for the Story Prize. So I need to get through this as well as Likes before I don't know if they've announced the winner yet. I haven't looked it up, but I want to make a decision for myself before they announce the one. And then The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donahue I just got. So nice. I love her. I loved Room. So yeah, I'm excited to read this. I haven't read Akin yet, and I have it. I don't know why I haven't picked it up. And this story though sounds really good. And the main character's name is Julia. So I'm excited. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved Room also, and I do want to read Akin and The Pull of the Stars as well. So can't wait to hear what you think about it.
Yeah.
I did like Akin. I have The Pull of the Stars. I have not read it yet.
Yeah. Well, great. Rachael.
So I went a little crazy and went back to the bookstore. So last week I bought some books when I was trying to get my husband's Valentine's Day gift. And then that wasn't in, so I had to wait for it to get delivered to the store. And so they called me, said, "The book's here." So I went to pick it up and I bought 4 more books for myself. So I got The Project by Courtney Summers.
Loved it.
She wrote Sadie, and I did like Sadie, and I think I'll like this one even more. It sounds really good. I also got Slay by Brittany Morris, which Kelly talked about last year on the podcast. It's about gaming and stuff, so that sounds fun.
Also good.
Another podcast recommendation, Alatsoe. Julia recommended this one. I love this hardcover. It's really like heavy, and the pages are a little bit deckled, which is fun.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty. And the naked cover has like the ghost dogs on it.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's a pretty book. And then the last book I got, I don't know anyone who's read it, and I don't know much about it. I just know the title is A Secret History of Witches by Louisa Morgan. And I know that it is multi-generational. So I love multi-generational stories. I love witches, and I love books with deckled edges. So I'm excited to try it. And if I like it, she has 2 more books with the word witches in the title. So there's more reading material if I like it. So that's all I got.
Great. Good haul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Michael Koryta, and we're going to be talking to him about his new thriller, Never Far Away. So stick around, and we'll be right back. And we are back, and we're joined today by author Michael Koryta, who is here to talk about his newest book, Never Far Away. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you on and to talk about this really thrilling book that you wrote. Yes, I have my copy here as well. And also, you're a Maine native, just like Rachael and I are. So we're also excited to have another Mainer on the podcast.
I have to qualify that. My wife would force me to say, I'm from away. So the fact that I have a residence in Maine does not qualify me to be a Maine native. I feel like you guys have to be 9 generations deep before you let someone really break into the Maine culture. But I'm trying.
Well, I was not aware. I guess this was a great interview. Thanks so much for stopping by. No.
End it now, right?
Yeah. But that you live there now, and you've lived there for a while, it sounds like. But your wife is from Maine?
Yeah, so she grew up in southern Maine, a little tiny town called Lyman, which you really need to know Maine to know Lyman. Went to high school in Biddeford, and then I've lived in Tennant's Harbor and Hope, and now in Camden.
Nice. Very cool. Nice. Well, to qualify, I don't live in Maine currently, but I did grow up there, and Rachael still lives there now. So
Rachael's the real deal here.
Yes, she is. She stuck it out.
Never left.
Yeah. Well, before we get into the interview, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and the kinds of books that you write.
I'm so bad about this stuff. I now have the drill down. I guess I would say that I write broadly under the heading of suspense. So I've done supernatural stories. I've done more traditional thrillers, detective series, if you call 4 books a series. So I just kind of use the bigger tent of suspense when people ask me. If you do not feel the books are suspenseful, I have failed you. That's my only real promise to the reader. And Never Far Away, I guess I would categorize as more of a thriller, but hopefully if I did my job, it also hits on a family drama level. That was the goal.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. It definitely was suspenseful for me. Like I kept thinking like, this is scary, but not in a like jump you kind of scary, but like I was afraid to look out my window at night scary. And I kept double checking that my doors were locked scary. So.
I don't know what it says about me that I'm smiling as you report that. The idea, the magic of books is you make that emotional transfer, and you know that the story is fiction, but it creeps in enough that you actually do carry some of those emotions. And as a reader, that's why I love books. That's why I fell in love with reading to begin with. So my goal would be, ideally I cost you some sleep. You check your locks. If you have a nightmare, that would be great, but you don't have to. It's all the things I'm striving for: good mental health and night terrors.
Yeah, I typically don't read scary stuff because I am such a scaredy cat. So I think when Rachael and I both read the first chapter of your book, we both were like, what did we just read? Because it starts off with this, just very, I think, suspenseful and frightening scene. So the premise of your book is a woman gets into a little bit of trouble, or she's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she has to fake her own death and then go live with a new identity away from her husband and children. And so they don't know her. And then one day they have to go live with her thinking she's their aunt. And so there's a secret identity. And then, things ensue from there. And there's a lot going on. And Kelly, you mentioned that there are actually, you notice there are characters in this book from another book.
Yes. I've been reading you for a long time now. And I really wish you guys could have seen my face reading this first chapter and realizing that the 2 men with Nina, who soon became Leah, were the Blackwell brothers, because I seriously almost threw the book across the room. I was really excited to not deal with them again, and they came back.
Which, it would be a big spoiler, but it's quite a surprise that they came back after Those Who Wish Me Dead, right? Like
Yeah.
you thought they were safely handled. I understand. I missed them. They have a really unique way of talking to each other. So when the Blackwell family, I originally just had, I think it was Jack. I was approaching Those Who Wish Me Dead with the idea of a character sort of like Sugar from No Country for Old Men, where you have this one force of nature kind of sociopath. But there were a couple issues there. One, I felt like it was familiar. We had seen it before. And then as he began to talk, he was always talking as if the victim, the soon-to-be victim, didn't exist. And he had no one to engage with. And so I added the brother, and I liked the way they kind of moved. I felt like one of my challenges getting into a book is, can I see it? Do I actually begin to feel as if I'm in the room? And the way the brothers moved without any communication, but created sort of this sense of like circling prey, that locked me visually into the scene, and it makes the writing more frightening. So I hope it makes the reading more frightening.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I'm glad it paid off.
I did notice that, the circling as if circling prey, because that first chapter, I keep going back and forth. I'm like, do we trust these guys or not? I don't understand.
Yeah.
We don't. We really don't.
And then with a character that's connected to them later, not to give too much away, I was constantly wondering that as well.
Yeah.
I feel like if I can get you to the point as a reader where you're not rooting for a villain, obviously, but you truly don't know which way they're going to go,
Right.
then that's it's a fun tightrope to try to walk, because usually we have, for any book to be successful, you need to have questions about the actions your protagonist will take. You know, if you know they're going to ride a straight trajectory, to me, it's usually a really boring read, unless the voice is just incredible. But when a narrative is most engaging, it's when I have some questions about what will my hero do? If I can also put that question in with the villain, I think that's a little more unusual, because usually the villain is played as a straight opponent, and it's an adversary. It's just an obstacle that needs to be overcome. And if I can make that obstacle into something that could shift on you and give a little bit, or then swing back and become frightening in a different way, hopefully then it's really hard to put the book down.
Wow.
I do think, though, that like Shagor from No Country for Old Men, like, I don't know that I would trust them, but I feel like they are honorable to a point where if they say they will help you, they will help you. Although maybe their definition of help might be a little bit different than what mine would be, but maybe.
It's tough to get into this without spoiling a lot, but my favorite scene in the book by far is there's a moment when Dax has a negotiation scene with one of the characters in Jeopardy. And that conversation was it was a lot of fun to write. And I hadn't anticipated it. So all of a sudden there was this sort of deal made that I felt like it honored both characters. It honored the desires they had to that point. And it suddenly swung the entire final act of the book to the point where I saw options now that I wouldn't have seen before. The people who seemed to be the obvious problem were maybe not a problem, but then we had also divided forces between our good guys. And that's when it really becomes fun, when you kind of I say create, but it doesn't feel like that. When the writing's going well, it doesn't feel like I'm engineering the scenario. It feels like, it's very natural that they would have gone this way. This is how the story's been building. And it's more of a subconscious driven moment than anything where I think, okay, A, B, C obviously led to D. It's much more of the experience of did not see that coming, but it fits with it has been earned by everything that came before it.
Yeah, I think when you've given your characters and built this world and given it such life, and it takes on a life of its own, and then at that point you're just listening to them, right? And going with, yeah.
When it's going really well, I feel like I type faster because I literally have the sense it's like being a court reporter, and you've got this, you know, cross-examination going, and there's new evidence, and you're just trying to keep up. And I'll notice in what I consider really good scenes, the first draft is just filled with typos. And that's actually, I view that when I print it out the next day and look at it, I view that as a really good sign. Yeah. Because it shows that I'm flying along as if I need to catch up. And then if I read 5 super clean pages the next morning, it probably means it wasn't, you know, that electric of a scene.
Interesting.
So backing up a little bit, what was the first kernel of this story that came to you? Like, not necessarily where did you get the idea, but like, what was the first image or sentence maybe, or whatever?
It's a really good question. It was Leah, just in general. The idea of this woman who has made what she views to be the greatest sacrifice you could possibly make. But she also feels like she has closed a door on a life. And to kick that door open was dramatically interesting, but also to reach the point where she has to reconcile and question whether what she viewed as a heroic choice initially, was it really the right one? So I guess to boil that down, it's the idea of the price of silence. And we make decisions every day, particularly with children, but with everyone in our lives, where we're dispensing information at a certain rate. And we think we're making the right choice in only telling someone so much, or maybe even like the white lie approach, but it's for their own good. You know, we can always rationalize that. And there's a point maybe where that works, but you're also creating a false narrative that someone else is believing as their reality. And that relationship between Leah and particularly Haley, I mean, both of the children, but Haley really that was the dynamic that really had a lot of pop for me. And then you asked a very good question. You said, was there a specific image? And so where we are in Camden, there's a yellow seaplane that flies over our house on a pretty consistent basis and lands on Maguntacook. And I would watch this thing go over, and it's just, it's kind of a curiosity, but that was just watching it, and there was no specific thought. It was just the idea of what would she be doing now? That gave me the entire backstory of she was a pilot. So then I begin to get a better understanding of who she is. And then at that point, I'm kind of off to the races.
I loved Leah. I loved her as a character. I keep imagining her as Gina Davis in Long Kiss Goodnight. I'm like, yeah. It's her.
That's actually very good casting. Yes, we need to grab Gina again. And isn't it Gina Davis in A League of Their Own too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great movie.
I loved that. Yeah.
I do love that movie.
And kind of related, did you know you always wanted the Blackwells to be a small part of it, like specifically the brothers in the beginning, or was that a super fun surprise? Or as I asked Aaron via text, did you realize that I was sleeping peacefully again, finally, after Those Who Wish Me Dead? And you were like, yeah, sorry, no, not anymore.
Yeah, Aaron told me you were getting nice, deep sleep, and I thought, we can't have that.
She's too comfortable.
Exactly. Adding the brothers in came very late. And I think that I never got off to the right start. So I was always picking Leah up with this. She's in the present and she has the heavy backstory. And then I'm unpacking the backstory, and it gets back to, there's like the Hemingway line of you write so much and then realize where the beginning is. And you would usually have, and I've done this a lot, you'd have to throw out maybe 30 pages and you find the beginning comes later. In this circumstance, it was the opposite. I realized that I had started too far down the road for her. And instead of unpacking that huge moment in backstory, it seemed like it was the natural point to bring her in. So I had always, the first chapter, the first page had been for, the better part of a year. The first page was the scene with the wasp.
Oh,
Just to me where the book started. But it wasn't about, it didn't have Leah in there, and it didn't have what to me is really the inciting incident of the entire story, which is her on that road, and you don't know exactly what she's doing. Is she being threatened? Is she going to be killed? And in a way, all of those things are true and also not true.
do you typically write more linearly, or is that sort of common where you'll start more further down and then have to go back?
It's gone both ways. I would say, let's see, this is 16 published books. I've written 20. Probably 10 times I've gotten the entry point. I don't know if I can say right necessarily, but the way I began the book is the way it appears in the final published version. And then 10 times it has gone the other way. So
Interesting.
I always feel really confident when I start that it's the right place.
Yeah.
Usually like 5 drafts in where it's, oh, that's not even the beginning of the book.
Yeah. I find myself, because I'm trying to write more, and I find myself often so tempted to jump around if I get an idea for a scene later on. I'm like, let me just write that right now. But then I have trouble going back and getting back into my rhythm. So I try to be very disciplined and sort of, no, just keep going, make a note, you'll get to it.
That's a really good point. I have that temptation on a regular basis. And I would, speaking personally, I would avoid that for 2 reasons. One, the scene that you haven't reached yet might shift dramatically as you get there. But also, if you let yourself, from just like a mental discipline point, if you let yourself pick and choose the good parts, it's almost an admission that you are not excited enough about the page that you're approaching that day. So while it is really tempting, the moment you begin to let yourself jump around like that, it's sort of letting yourself off the hook of, I need to do today's work as well as I can, which always is tempting. I mean, let's be honest, it would be great to just write, the 9 scenes that are in your mind at that time and not connect them.
That's such a good point.
It is tempting. I agree with you completely on that.
I've been good lately. I've just been trying to be good, but it's a temptation I've given into.
The only time I let myself do that, I think ever, was in If She Wakes. That was the first book with Dax Blackwell. And I'd written pretty far along in that book, and he was not a character. And I kept thinking, this is a book where if it were possible, I would love to have the Blackwell brothers in this book. And at the same time, I was working on the screenplay for Those Who Wish Me Dead. So they were very front and center in my mind. And I was aware of how much I missed them. I missed the way they talked. And also thinking about it and discussing it with the producer and the director at that point, you get into these character conversations, and it's like, well, what matters to these guys? And I kept explaining on the script side, I kept saying, it's not that they don't have a code at all. They don't care about anyone except each other, but they care about each other deeply. Family is everything to them. And as I was explaining that family is everything to them, I thought, well, it's really strange that you have this, and in that book, they have a sister too. So you have this odd family of sociopaths, but they're deeply committed to each other. It's like, well, why would they not have, an heir to the throne? Why would they not have wanted to sort of build the family? Right. So I broke out the first chapter with Dax. I broke that out into a separate document and gave him, I almost looked at it as an audition. Like, if you're a good idea, you will work on your own, and then I'll put you into the book. And I wrote what became, I think it's the 3rd chapter of the book. I wrote that as a standalone, and then I think it was 7 pages, went back through, read that and thought, okay, yep, he wants to be in the book. He's earned it. So we'll let him come play now.
Nice.
That's fascinating.
I mean, are
It
you
was-
really going to tell him no? Because I feel like that's a super bad idea.
Didn't work out so well.
Good
for you.
point. Yeah, once I introduced him, he was great.
I actually did want to ask about the movie. I know it's out May 14th in theaters, hopefully, and also HBO Max. Besides the screenplay, like how involved were you? Did you get casting input maybe, or?
No, so for initially, I just gave the book away. You know, it went to Fox optioned it before the book even came out, and they brought on a screenwriter who I was excited about, and we didn't get his. How am I going to say this and be nice? His best work just wasn't great on that project. I don't know if we got his best work. So I had some conversations with the studio, and they wanted a change too. And I had not really done much screenwriting at that point. I'd done a little bit, but not much. And so I had a conversation where I pitched what I thought essentially they should be pushing for. And one of the executives on it came back to me and said, well, do you want to write it? And I hadn't really considered that, but said, yeah, let's give this a try. So then I got really involved, and for a year that was it was the dominant thing of my life, and it was for a different studio, Fox, and a different director than what ultimately ended up happening. You know, Disney bought Fox, Fox disappeared, and the executive who had it left. Actually, a couple of them did. The director, because Fox didn't get it into production in time, left. And then the writer director who they brought on to replace both me and the previous director was still interested in the project. God bless him, because it was dead at that point. You know, it had been several years. They dumped a lot of money into it, and it just seemed to have like died at the goal line. And then Taylor Sheridan came back and said he was interested in doing it. And it got set up with a completely different studio and somehow made, which, looking back on it, I mean, maybe that's the way lots of movies are made, but it seemed like the title was really apt for that project. I mean, we were going through studios, executives, directors, and then somehow ran right into a global pandemic. So it really has been a unique journey to screen, but it does come out in theaters on May 14th, wherever theaters are open. You know, we'll see about that. I don't know how wide that will be.
Right.
And then
hopefully
HBO,
by then.
yeah, it seems like we're beginning. Rates are, I don't want to, knock on wood here, but rates are going down, vaccines are going up. Hopefully by May, we can get a little bit of theater life.
Yeah.
So last question from me. What's the best bit of research you've done for a project? And if it's not the big cat sanctuary, can we also talk about that?
It was, you had it. It's definitely spending time around the Exotic Feline Rescue Center. And I would encourage everyone to go check them out, online, social media, whatever. It's an amazing, amazing place. And I went up there as a writer just to do research, and it ended up becoming something that for a number of years, I spent a lot of time. I think I went on 15 rescues by the time it was all done. It's been another COVID casualty. I haven't been, and not being in Indiana, I haven't seen those cats in quite a while, and I really miss them. But it was such a crazy place. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and you have over 200 tigers, lions, leopards, bobcats, pick your exotic cat. And they were all privately owned. Most of them came from situations of terrible abuse and neglect. I've been on a couple of rescues where, what you see when you get down there could bring you to tears. And then you get them back and you see the way they settle into their new home. And that is by far the most rewarding thing I've ever been involved in that I would remotely attach to book research. So yeah, go look at the pictures of the big cats. And then I know everyone's like, this is a year where there are so many causes that need money, you know, so everyone's hitting people up for donations, but the Tigers could use a few dollars too. So.
Certainly good.
Erin, who is one of my really good friends, your publicist, Erin Mitchell, who is amazing and perfect, did message me a couple of pictures, so we can Instagram one out. But she also said that I need to tell you that everyone who knows me knows how I feel about nature and cold, and somehow you made it so that Maine was not the scariest part of this book. So thank you.
I guess all credit is due probably to Dax on that front, though, right? I mean, he did the heavy lift.
And Bleak.
And Bleak. Bleak was a fun one.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I am from Maine. I wouldn't call it scary, but certainly there's a wildness to it that I think you captured really perfectly. I thought the way you described the setting in Maine, it took me there so clearly, and I really enjoyed that. I think there was one chapter, even when you're just describing what September is like in Maine, I'd never heard it so eloquently described, how it's warm air, but it's deceptive, and like fall is trapped in that warm air. Like, yes, that's how I feel. Yeah. So what do you think it is about Maine? I mean, it almost felt like Maine was a character in your book, to be honest. So what do you think it is about the state that makes it such a compelling place to set a book?
I hope it feels like a character. I love books where the landscape actually takes on an active role, and it can push back, you know, be sort of a force of hostility, or depend, like Leah knows the terrain in the Allagash really well. So at a certain point, it becomes the hostility of the landscape becomes an advantage to her because she can embrace it. But in general, I mean, it's visually so beautiful, and you have such different country. You can go from this like idyllic coastal environment to, I mean, when you get into northwestern Maine, it's funny to think about American history. You know, the path of manifest destiny, we went out and conquered all of these different frontiers. And Thomaston, so I'm always driving through South Thomaston, Maine, and the sign says it's like first settled in 1612 or 1610, which that's a nice early start. But no one really went northwest and stayed. You know, like when you get up there, it's hunting and logging, and that's about it. I'm just kind of fascinated by looking at the map, and you realize how much space is just empty. I mean, you're talking about thousands of square miles of very rugged wilderness. I don't know if you guys remember the story of Geraldine, I think her name was LeGray. She was the woman, really tragic story. She was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and then she got off the trail. Yes. And she died, I think, starved to death in her tent. But it was the most expensive and elaborate search the Maine game wardens had ever put on. And there were all these theories that, you know, she had been abducted. People were chasing leads to Tennessee and Texas. And when they finally found her, there's a really good book called When You Find My Body, which is taken from her journal entry. She was, I think, 0.2 of a mile off the trail. Oh. And that sounds impossible, right? To have, I mean, they had planes and dogs and helicopters and all these skilled trackers. It's like, how could they not find her? But if you've been in Maine and you've walked, the woods are so densely packed, you lose any attempt of finding a horizon point, a navigation point. And she made some bad choices, but she also, I think one of the heartbreaking things about her story to me is she made this choice of like ultimate faith, which was, if I just stay here, someone's going to find me, right? It's 2018, I think, is when it happened. Like they're going to find me. I'm not that far away. And the fact that they couldn't speaks to the legitimacy of the Maine wilderness. And I spent a lot of time in Montana and Wyoming and those areas. And I've noticed like the guys out west never want to give Maine its due credit as wilderness. You know, it's like, okay, that's East Coast. It's, you know, settled. And I would invite anyone who's done, you know, Rocky Mountain hiking to do some backcountry work in Maine. It's really legitimately rugged and dangerous, but that's only one portion of the state. You get to the other portion and you have that coastal history, you have that quaintness, that idyllic feel. And so in this book, I wanted to create that separation where Leah, when she thought she was alone, was trying to forge something out in the most remote reaches of the state. And then when the children come back into her life, she pivots and thinks, well, I need to provide them this other thing that she imagines is in Camden. And to the kids, they're still like, no, you know, this is not, it's not what they know. It's still, it's strange. And, you know, when we're kids, it's not, I don't think most of us really thought about our hometowns too deeply. It's just, that's home. You don't want to leave home and go to a strange place. So crossing, that's a long way of answering the question, but trying to capture the different emotional feels of the state was one of the goals I had for the book. So if it worked for you, that's great, particularly because you know it.
I think you captured the reality of the two Maines very, very well. And I think it was so realistic how Haley and Nick, especially Haley, would get to either of those two Maines and just be like, no, because, you know, for those of us who grew up there, it was just home and it was normal. And now I live in a city in Maryland and it's so different. I'm like, oh, now I could see how, you know, someone who wasn't used to that would see Maine and would think about it. But to me, it was just how we grew up. But then a character like Matt Bouchard, who I love Matt. He's one of my favorite characters.
That was fun to write.
Oh my gosh. He's just like, yeah, this is great. She's going to love this. I'm going to take her to this amazing spot and she's going to be so impressed. It was so cute.
I enjoyed Alafair Burke told me I should write a children's book featuring Matt Bouchard, and my agent, and I think lesser praise. I mean, he enjoyed the character, but this description cracked me up. He said he kept calling Matt young Pete Buttigieg.
That's cute. Yeah, you could write. He could be a detective, a boy detective. Could write a series.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about your writing process, but you know, with this year, as you said, the global pandemic kind of threw a lot of your projects probably a little topsy-turvy, but did it affect your writing process at all? Or did you feel like you kind of kept to what you'd always done?
From a writing process standpoint, it all felt pretty normal. Everything else was abnormal. And then on the movie side, like last year was supposed to be the year of premieres and, you know, the movie appearing in the theater, and it was like, well, when will this happen? And then you kind of realize that's not going to happen. You know, I think we're a long way from being back to that kind of. So in the screenwriting side, it was very strange because the only thing you could do was write. And so suddenly I felt like I had more inbound calls last year from producers than I have ever had. And it wasn't that I was doing anything new or exciting or was any more appealing. It's just like production had stopped. So everyone was developing. And it's like, well, you know, who do I have to call? Who's the writer that I haven't been in touch with? And that felt exciting at first. And then you pause to think about it and you realize, well, that's all everyone is going to be doing in that industry in 2020. I would love to know how many actors said, this is the year I will write my script. You know, it will create a logjam of, from the network and studio side, you're going to be able to pick from a lot of great projects. How that shakes out, I'm not sure. From the book side, you know, I was one of the most fortunate people on the planet because I could just do what I do every day. And it didn't feel, it was a very nice escape from the pandemic, from the election, from everything. It was just I know some writers wanted to put the pandemic into their work. And I did not feel that way at all. It felt too close, too soon. So we just pretended that it did not happen. And, you know, I don't think is there a tell in there of what year it is? I know Dax makes a joke about Melania Trump at one point. He says, be best. So that's the only thing that would even like put it in an era, I think.
Yep, I think that was the only tell, but you wouldn't know exactly which year. So I think we've had a few authors on and they've all said the same as you, you know, they didn't want to go there with the pandemic in their work. Sorry, my cat's going to get in the screen.
I love a good cat sighting.
Yeah, she loved your book. She wants to talk about it.
Excellent.
So, I mean, you know, as a podcast, we are definitely big on recommendations. We tell people what they should read. So my first question is, what are you currently reading?
Currently, I read a biography of a photographer he's from Rockland, Maine. And then he actually worked with Disney for a while and came back to Maine and did this sort of iconic stretch of photographs for Life magazine. His name is Kosti Ruohomaa. I'm not sure on the last name, but it was fascinating. I didn't know anything about him. I knew some of the pictures, so I just kind of stumbled into that. But that was really good. I think if you did not know Maine and the areas, it's probably a little more dry reading. I had the opportunity to read Stephen King's new one that comes out in March, which is called Later, which I loved, and it's classic King. It has a really nice supernatural element, but it also is one of the funnier books I've read in quite a while. Like I was laughing out loud at different portions. He really is funny. Trying to think what else. Paulette Giles, who wrote News of the World, I read her new one this year, which is Simon the Fiddler. I really like that. Laura Lippman's essay collection, My Life as a Villainess, was excellent. I was looking for funny stuff a lot last year, like Sloane Crosley. If you've never read her essays, check those out. She's kind of in that David Sedaris mold of, I will take this moment of my own embarrassment and just like, you know, blow it up on steroids, and we all relate to it. She's really good.
Sloane Crosley?
Crosley, Crosley. Trying to think who else. I read a book I loved called When We Were the Kennedys by it's either Monica Wood or Monica Woods. I think it's Monica Wood. And that's a memoir of her life growing up in this mill town in Maine in the 60s. And all of it was good, but I loved the way we were talking about setting as character. And she turns the mill into this thing that was very complex, where on one hand she blames it legitimately for killing her father, you know, poisoning her father, and then on the other hand she's able to see it as the thing that brought all of this life to the town where she grew up. And I just thought she did a beautiful job of handling that nuance. Really good writer.
Nice.
That's actually the town Rachael and I are from.
Oh, really? Okay. You read?
Yes. I loved it as well. And her sister Anne was my French teacher in high school. So, and Anne is a major part of the book. So it was
Anne's
just
a major
wonderful.
Part of the book. Yeah. She's the one who comes home and has to assume not the mom role, just take on sort of the parenting burden.
Caretaker. And she was a caretaker for her sister Betty or Betsy, I can't remember now. For the rest of her, they are still.
Did you know the uncle?
No.
Bob father. Okay.
No, I didn't know them other than Madame Wood, but she was my favorite teacher. I mean, she was just such a lovely person. Everything in the book is so spot on, I think. But yes, I love Monica's books. I've read several of them. We should get her on the podcast, but I agree she captured the dichotomy of how the mill is like so central to the town and yet also this threat to it at the same time. I
thought it, while it's regional to Maine, it probably speaks to an enormous amount of America because you have all of these manufacturing towns. Like I grew up in the Midwest, and all of my family is originally from Cleveland, and well, that's Cleveland. You know, it's like we were the steel city, then that goes away. And while it's nice that the Cuyahoga River no longer catches on fire, it's also very sad to see the, you know, gutted economy. And then how you attempt to replace that is a much bigger question than it seems on its face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated that you actually knew her sister. That's great. I just got Ernie's Ark, which is a collection of, I think, short stories.
Is that her new? Okay.
I think it might actually be older, but it was new.
I've read the one about the sisters was one that I loved. Yeah, it's been a while. I'll have to check that out. I love short stories, so yeah.
Very interesting.
Can you tell us anything about what you're working on now? Any new projects, new books you're writing?
Yeah, I just finished a book that will be published in October, but under my pen name. So I have an alter ego named Scott Carson, and he's kind of handling the supernatural horror side of things for me now.
Okay.
So, this one's more in like the Stephen King, Joe Hill mold, more like So Cold the River or The Ridge. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of fun. We talk about escapes from 2020. This was a great one to just dive into. The basic ideas, I was fascinated by seeing all of the advertisements for apps like Calm and Headspace, and I think there's like 10% happier. And they really pushed at the start of the pandemic, which made sense. They were advertising like crazy, like download this app and we will improve your mental health. And then with the warped mind that I have, I thought, well, it would be really interesting if they were doing something evil to your brain instead. And so I just kind of took that and ran with it. So I'm trying to take whatever it is that relaxes people in life and then turn it into a nightmare for them. That's my mission, my one-man crusade against, good sleep.
Cool. Well, that's really exciting. So we'll have to have you back on when your alter egos book publishes.
I'll wear a different hat.
Yeah, you should wear one of those glasses with the mustache.
Get the Groucho Marx thing going.
Yeah. Well, this was super fun. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you? Are you on social media?
Thank you to Aaron Mitchell. I exist on the internet only because of Aaron. And it would be michaelkoryta.com. And I probably should spell the last name, right? Koryta. So no one gets that one from the famous word of mouth sales. It's Koryta's not ideal.
We did practice pronouncing it before you got on.
Think margarita and think fajita.
Oh.
I need a food truck. It'd be...
Yes.
Koryta's fajitas.
Koryta's fajitas would really catch on.
I love it. That's easy. I'll remember it forever now.
Well, thank you guys for taking the time and promoting the books.
Absolutely.
So that's our show. If you are interested in getting Book of the Month, our March pick should be up soon, and you can get your first one for $9.99 with the promo code What You Should Read, all one word.
And be sure to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at WYSR_podcast. You can email us at whatyoushouldreadpodcast@gmail.com. Please give us a rating and a review wherever you're listening. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We post all our videos there, as well as bonus videos like Kelly doing the polar plunge. We'll have
that's our most popular one.
Yep. We'll have a bunch of links down in the show notes for the readathons going on right now, like the Bachelorette readathon and the 'Tis the Damn readathon, which starts March 1st.
And Rachel's blog.
And my YouTube channel is also linked down below. So.
And now you know what you should read.
You're welcome.
You know what you should read. You know what you should read. You know what you should read.
It's time for What You Should Read, the podcast all about the titles you need. Join 3 book lovers and a guest as they cover all the best new titles to enjoy with your tea.
I have that, but I haven't read it yet.